I was accused ultimately in my own comment section of being self centered, and so, I started looking at the dictionary definitions of what that term even means. And, I came to the realization that I prefer the Oxford definition, of the term, which I realize is an English, not US, dictionary, but I wondered, well, actually, it says U.S. English, tending to think only about yourself and not thinking about the needs and feelings of others. And I thought, if I've come to that point, maybe I don't so much consider the feelings of others because, I have been treated for most of my life with contempt by other people, and so I've had to develop a I don't give a fuck attitude about the feelings of others because they've mistreated me my entire life. I have been targeted unfairly on the basis of completely invalid reasons to judge another person over and over and over again over the course of my life. You know what? Other people's feelings and their priorities, fuck them. I don't mean to say this about all individuals, but if you're going to treat me like shit, you are shit because you're treating me like shit. And that's how I feel. No one has the right to do this to another person and to treat them in so contemptibly as I've been treated over my life. And with the abuse that I've been subjected to over the course of my life, maybe I don't care about most other people because most other people have treated me like absolute garbage and trash over the course of my life, and I can only submit that they only did this because they themselves are trash, you know, and so they took it out on me. You see, the way that I feel about all of it is that if they were not such trash, they would not have to treat me like trash themselves, and I feel that I am treated in this manner because people are miserable, and so they endeavor to make somebody else feel as miserable as they feel inside. Only my submission is, if that's the way that you are, if you must make everybody else feel miserable in order to find relief from your own misery, then you are miserable solely because you deserve to be. You deserve to suffer because you make other people suffer to punish them because you are suffering. It's karma. You're getting and you feel exactly as you deserve to feel. There's a scene in Elfen Lied that comes to mind, at the end of the day, in all of this, because I completely agree with what Lucy says at the end of it.
あいつな生意気だな、お前。人間じゃねえくせに。お前らうっと離せやめろ。お前がこんなにうろたえるとこ初めて見たよ。
お前泣きも笑いもしねえし気味悪いんだよ。
泣けよ。泣いてお願いしてみろよ。でないとお前の代わりに犬が痛い目に遭うぞ。このおい、その犬蹴っ飛ばしちゃえよ。
やめろ。
直接いじめるよりこっちの方が効果あるじゃん。押さえつけてろよ。
こんなことどうしてやめて。
なんだよ、お前 前が教えてくれたんだろ。
だって、こんなことするだなんて。ごめんなさい。私がつい喋っちゃったの。あれ、動かなくなっちゃったぞ。
早すぎ。
自分が不幸だから自分より不幸なものが必要なんだろう。人間じゃないのは、人じゃないのはお前らの方だ。うわっ、
I submit that Lucy's judgment was completely valid. That was the pink-haired girl in the room. That she did nothing wrong. That she was just rightfully avenging the dog and extracting divine justice on the bastards who felt that they had the right to treat another person that way and to be a bully. They got what they had coming. Quite simply, and the world is a slightly better place because they are dead after that scene. And we should be grateful to her because she has cleansed the world of that subhuman trash. So, am I self-centered? I would submit otherwise. I simply do not care about the feelings of anybody who doesn't treat me with love and respect. If you are an abusive person towards me, if you hurl invective at me, if you throw, insults at me, I could not care less if you died tomorrow. Or if some mass shooter were to take you out of the gene pool. In fact, honestly, I would not, if I got on that jury, I would make it personal, and I would not convict, no matter what the weight of the evidence was, against the shooter, because you can't murder what isn't human. And it takes a person who isn't a human being to insult me. Everybody who ever did is not a person, and cannot sit with us at the human table. If you don't respect me, frankly, you are not a person to me. How did I get this way? Well, I've actively told you I've been bullied. I've been abused, I've been harassed, I've been subjected to every form of my society and culture failing me. I've been failed by every major institution in my society. My life story, which I will not share with you out of respect, has been awful. I have been failed by the hospital system, by the medical system, I've been failed by the schooling system, and ultimately by the courts and by the law. So that is pretty much every major institution in our society, and I have been abused. I've had the indignity of having teachers ultimately behave in appalling manners that only reinforced the bullying that was happening on the playground, whether they realized what they were doing or meant well or not is irrelevant. Their behavior and conduct contributed actively to the harassment that was subjected upon my soul. So, am I self-centered? No, but I only care about the feelings, and thoughts and, all of those that I consider friends and allies. To the rest of humanity, I could not care less what happens to you about your lives or anything about you, I did not get this way overnight. I did not become this way, as the result of any as a result of just natural consequence, or you know, I would not have been this way. This was preventable. Somebody could have done something to keep me from becoming this way by treating me better than they did. But you have created the kind of individual, which the proverb applies to. Over time, which is that the child who was not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth. The one. You have you have created exactly that sensation within me, and this image that's not showing up in fullness, that's stupid. No. Alright, so fine. The child who was not embraced by the image will burn it down to feel its warmth. I would submit that the village, so to speak, has not embraced me, and so do I care for the emotions of the villagers? No. I do not, I care only for those who have treated me with kindness, compassion, and respect. They are the only people who are of significance to me at all. As to everyone else who has ever even so much as hurled a pejorative in my direction, I consider you an eternal enemy of mine. I curse you and the ground on which you walk. There's not much else to say about it. So, if we look at the definitions of being self-centered, no, I do not. I care about others' needs other than my own. I just don't, really so much care about, the sentiments of those who I don't know and have not been good to me, or have been the opposite, or have actively abused me. I do care about the people who have treated me with compassion, kindness, and respect, and I can't help caring about them, but I think that this is a much better definition of the term self-centered, preoccupied with oneself and one's affairs. And if we're going by the Oxford definition of the term, yes, I would plead with you that I am guilty, but that is not the same thing as what being selfish or a narcissist is, concerned exclusively with oneself, or seeking, or concentrating on one's own advantage or well-being without regard to others, arising from concern with one's welfare or advantage and disregard to others, being actively replicating selfish DNA. Did it. Devoted to caring only for oneself, concerned primarily with one's interest in and benefits, welfare, regardless of others. Now, see, the thing is that I may tend to focus on myself and my own affairs, but that doesn't mean that I never, ever, ever, ever consider the affairs of another person, or behave with compassion and with kindness and with concern for the affairs of other people. I just tend to be very, self-involved in that, I will only focus on, the desires and affairs of those who, like I said, have been kind to me, have been good to me. Ask yourself, kind viewer, have you treated me like shit? Have you insulted me in my own comment section? Have you hurled invective and abuse in my direction? And if you have, or am I familiar with you? Or am I not familiar with you at all? You see, it's hard to care about the affairs of somebody for which you do not know on a personal and individual level. That does not mean I will never come to care for those people. It's just that I don't know you right now, in the moment, and that's why I don't care. You can make me care, get to know me, don't treat me like shit like so many other people in my life have. You know, I noticed that there's a lot of women who will make the comment that, to the effects of men confuse kindness with flirting, and it's like, ah, no. I have learned over the course of my life not to make that mistake, but at the same time, I would fire back at you that one has the tendency to feel attraction, especially towards those individuals who behave with conduct towards you that you have been deprived of over most of your life. And so, if you have lived a life at the mercy of others who have hurled invective, abuse, and insults in your direction and have had to put up with the shit hurled at you by other people that was abusive and insulting for your entire life, then you would tend to feel attracted to people who treat you with kindness. It would be a turn on. Simply because it's one way of standing out from the overwhelming tide of abusive conduct towards you. And yes, that has been my life. I have been treated as a pariah of the community for my entire existence. And so I behave with what may superficially appear to be, self-centered behavior, but that is only on the surface. And once you get to know me and pierce beyond that, you will come to realize that when I feel a kinship with somebody who has treated me with kindness and compassion and dignity and respect and has not behaved in an otherwise insulting fashion, that I tend to repay this kindness with kindness of my own. I have lived my life, socially speaking, by a set of very, incredibly simple, rules for, despite having to spend 20 minutes talking about this issue. It's not complicated. It is deceptively simple. It's just tit for tat. You treat me like shit, I treat you like shit. You treat me kindly, I treat you kindly, because I have been conditioned by, my growing awareness of game theory and everything else to view life as a whole as part of the field of play. And as a result, ultimately, of the gamified existence that I now, live my life by, I view, social relations as part of that game. And so if you treat me cruelly, then you're going to get cruelty. And if you, I would reply ultimately that since I behave and function as a mirror, that if you're going to hurl the accusation of being self-centered in my direction, that perhaps you take a look at me, because I really only behave ultimately in a social context as a mirror of other people's conduct. What you give me is what you get in return, and that is the deal that everybody is now subjected to in my life. I will not, this is how it's functioned in my family for my life at this point. My father lamented for years and years and years that he couldn't get me to do anything, but the moment mom asked me to do it, I would do it. And it was because mom did favors for me. It was like if I needed something, I could ask her, and she would usually, unless she was just completely out of it, run to get it accomplished for me. And so when I didn't feel like doing something, I would relate it back to all the times that she didn't feel like doing something and yet sucked it up and did it for me anyways. I remember all the times in my life that she was there for me despite having a different priority and wanting to do something else entirely. And so when she wants to go to the store and I'm not up for it and everything else, I will go with her to assist her on that, because I am repaying her own kindness with kindness of my own. I live my life at this point by this rule. And so you would do well to remember you only get what you give.